I want to switch gears here and talk about the run defense. We asked Shelby Harris about that, and he sort of said, "Okay, I'm not. We're going to get that figured out." But against the Chargers, there was a stretch there. I mean, they were giving up some really big chunk plays. They gave up runs of 22, 26, 22 in the game. I think they had 4 carries in there that went over 18, 210 rushing yards, 5.5. Here's Vic Fangio talking about the run defense.
Yeah, it was disappointing there in that most of them were all of them really were fundamental errors on our part in calls that we played a lot prior, to the first half when we were playing the run good. And when we played the run better late in the game. But we had a stretch in there where fundamentally we were off, okay? And obviously when you do that, you're going to have problems, and we did have our problems.
All right, so how concerned are you about the run defense? Because it was something we came into the game saying, well, without Mike Purcell, we'll see how they end up playing out that with the nose tackle. You're going to see some Deshaun Williams. You'll see some Sylvester Williams. It's not going to be Mike Purcell. You mentioned earlier that you'd actually like to maybe see them take a run at Snacks Harrison potentially and maybe bring in a nose tackle. And honestly, Mike Purcell was kind of like that guy. Like Mike Purcell was a guy that they kind of brought in late, and he ended up, they substituted him late last year, or like in the 5th game last year, and he just kind of stayed the course, got a new contract as a result of it. Are you concerned about the defensive line and the run stop?
Yes. And they do need to work that. I don't know that Sly Williams is the guy. I mean, he is a guy, but I don't know that he's the guy. And Mike Purcell, really validating that, him being out of there really validates the extension that they gave him, because you're seeing a difference in what this team is able to do. And I know Shelby said that they'll get that shored up, and that's fine, But the reality is the bodies that they have aren't Mike, And Mike does such a great job anchoring there. It really is tough to. It really is tough to replace. Yeah, I'd love to see him just take a run. Go. He's on a practice squad out there. Just go get him. If he's unprotected, just go get him. Bring him in. What's the worst thing that can happen? So that's just the way I would go with it.
Okay. Well, as far as the Broncos, if they're going to try to make it work with what they have, you got the matchup against the Falcons coming up. You got the Raiders. You got teams that know. They have players on their team that know how to run the ball. Todd Gurley, for whatever he's worth at this point in his career, but Josh Jacobs is a guy that'll absolutely gash you. So I guess my level of concern is also pretty high. But what do you think for the Broncos right now? Can they do schematically to kind of work with that a little bit? I thought that there were times where even the linebackers, more specifically Josie Jewell, who I didn't think had a bad game, but Josie Jewell was a guy that seemed like he was out of position a couple of times.
He did seem like he was out of position. I think part of that is having to compensate for the fact that that run point isn't anchored by Mike. I think there's an interchange and a symbiosis. We talk about that kind of stuff all the time, that, people were talking about Justin Simmons having a bad year, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute now. You got a guy who's having to cover for 2 rookies out there most of the year. It's really is a situation where, not everything is just can be blamed on one guy. And so, I think that if you're Josie, you got to make sure you're in the right spots, and you're going to have to be extra cognizant of that, simply because you don't have Mike out there in front of you eating up blockers.
Okay. What about the rest of the defensive line? Draymond Jones had a great sack.
I thought he had a great game. He was active, especially early on plays. I love to see that. And obviously Shelby. You're going to get great production out of him, but. I just think that they've got to figure out that nose, and they got to make sure that's shorn up, because getting run on suddenly makes you susceptible. It makes you susceptible to play action game, because you're gonna have to figure out ways to stop that run, and who you're gonna pull in to do that. And that takes somebody out of the pass pattern. It's just it's something that you got to make sure you're showing up. This team has been good against the run, and that's largely in part to Mike Purcell.
How did you think about the defense? What did you think about the defensive performance overall?
That was pretty good. There was a couple of plays in there where it felt like, hey, what in the world's going on with the tackling here?
Well, that was the kind of the stretch that Vic was referencing there.
Right.
He said there's kind of a stretch in there where they were getting 5-6 yards per carry, and guys were just sort of bouncing off their backs. That was a little bit surprising to me for a Vic Fangio coach team. He usually puts a heavy emphasis on tackling, and it seemed as though those guys were pushing them off the ball.
Yeah, it did. And then guys got loose in the open field, and there was some missed open field tackles. Ojemudia missed one. Gosh, who else missed one? I know Josie missed one. There was a couple of them there on some of those big runs that they popped that you were just like, oh, you got to make that tackle, bring him down. I think Bassey missed one too. It just, if you're going to play the way the Broncos play, you're going to have situations where those corners are going to have to make tackles in the open field. You can't miss on that.
They got credited with 10 missed tackles in the game, according to PFF. And Michael Ojemudia, you brought him up. He had 4, according to PFF. And that's something that I'd say actually he's generally pretty good at. Like, I mean, that's one of the things I loved about him coming out of Iowa is that he was a short tackler. There was a moment there where he was trying to tackle, I want to say it was a running back, and he came in just with his shoulder.
Yeah, you can't
try to take him down, and he just kind of bounced off of him.
Right.
I'm like, no, you gotta get
wrap
in
him
there.
up. Get low, get low and wrap him up.
Go ahead.
Well, it's frustrating to see because, like you talked about with it, Vic Fangio. I wanted to ask if there was any fallout from Ed Donatel, Mike Munchak not being there, but I didn't want to get into it and have them throwing guys under the bus and that kind of stuff. So,
what do you think about Kareem Jackson? I think a lot of people are going to point to the hit on Bouye, and then of course he had a hit on Pope later on, sent both those guys out. But it's as far as an intimidator. As far as a tone setter,
that's what he is.
I mean, he is
a strong safety. That's what he is.
One of the reasons why the Broncos were able to make that comeback.
He is. He's a strong safety. That's his job. His job's out there to make those receivers, remember that you don't come across this part of the field, you're going to get lit up. I think that the refs are going to keep an eye on him next week because of what happened this past week. I think there's going to be attention to it. And if he does do a helmet to helmet, he'll get flagged for it. But that's what he's there for, and that's what he does. All those hits were legal. They were legal hits. So it stinks that Bouye just happened to be the recipient, getting blindsided there. But K-Jack's out there trying to make a play. That's what he does.
But you remember that Chargers game last year? I mean, remember he was kind of the energy that ended up leading to that win. I mean, he made plays all over the field. He was flying everywhere.
He's been that guy before. He is. He's another heart and soul guy out there. As a guy who's played corner a lot of his career, but is probably always best as a safety. And he's a hitter for somebody his size. You don't expect somebody like that to be a big ball of energy like that, but he is.